Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to the Let's Code series. Today we're going to be creating a header. Before we get started, just a few little pieces of maintenance. I've made a few little tiny changes to the website off screen, so let's go ahead and take a look at those. All of these changes are actually in the CSS document. Well, actually, that's not true at all. But the main change that I've made is in the CSS document, and that is that I've relocated basically all of the color settings for our website to one chunk of code. If we come down here, this is basically everything that we worked on in the last video, making this nice footer, which, looks great on the website. All of those settings are still down there. All I've done is just exported literally just the background color and the border color to this little special section up here at the top. And what this does is it basically allows us to control all of the color for the entire document, in one little chunk of code, so we don't have to go around like searching for color settings through the document or anything like that. We can very quickly and easily make changes to the color scheme if we want to, and this seems incredibly handy for me. I'm not like totally locked in on the color scheme. Most of the like basic design for all of the UI elements is probably not going to change, but the colors might be tweaked quite a bit. One other thing that I did do is I've been working on, of course, working with accessibility. I should actually probably make this slightly bigger so people can see it better. Sorry about that if that was annoying. If we come down to the bottom of the document, this is a pretty good example. Oh, here we go. This will work really well. You see here, these are our additional like secondary links for our bottom navigation. And what I've done basically is I've added these little title elements. And the way that this works is I'll just show you really quickly. If we were to hover over any particular element that has this title in it, after a certain point of time on the cursor here, it will just give us like a little bit more of a description about what clicking this link will do. In my case, if it's going to take us to an external link, I literally just put like a simplified version of the URL as this title. And apparently that's very, very useful for people who are using screen readers and stuff. It will read out that title as part of the link so they know like really exactly what the link is going to be taking them to. The way that it works is really simple. If we come down to any element that has a link, we can just come in here and add a title element. And then inside of that, whatever text we type will be added as the title. If we switch back over to our website here, reload. Now if I hover over the Twitter icon, the URL will pop up and it will just be more verbose. People will know exactly what links are doing. That seems good, I guess. I don't know. I just read somewhere that you're supposed to do it, so I did it, whatever. I don't really know what I'm doing. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started working on a header. So first thing I'll do is I'll just close out this thing here. We don't really need that. And the positioning of the header is obviously pretty important. We want it to be basically the first thing on our website. So if we come down here to the main, right above that, we're going to want to go ahead and open up our header tag. And we can add a little bit of spacing up top if we want to, and a little bit of spacing down at the bottom. And then we'll just go ahead and close out the header tag so we don't forget about that. And then we can go ahead and get started. So I guess the first thing that we'll do is we'll just create a little bit of navigation, which we'll do with in another separate div class. We'll use one of these nav divs. This is, technically its own class, but it's basically just a div. It inherits all the properties from a div. It's just, if it's a navigation, it makes sense, I guess, to use this class. So then inside of this, all we need to do is create some links. So that's ahref equals we'll do a hash for just a blank link at the moment, and then we can close that, type in a title for our link, and then close out of that. And then we'll just create a few copies and change these up to be whatever we want them to be. So now if we take a look at our website, shouldn't really be much of anything going on. We're just going to have a few little links up here at the top. So I guess now is as good a time as any to hop over to the CSS and start making some changes. Well, actually what we'll do first before we do that is if I look at the directory for this repo here, what I have is an image that I want to use as basically like a favicon. Let me get to the current version of this website so I can show you here. What I have are essentially two elements in this header. We have these social links, or these links to the actual navigation for the website, and then I have this logo up here, which is going to always link back to the home for the website, which is just index.html. So in order to do that, what I actually have are in this images folder, I have, let's just get rid of some of this junk that we're not using right now. What I have are two images here, a light version and a dark version of this logo that I use on, my website and my YouTube channel and everything. So I want to go ahead and set this up. Now, the tricky thing about this is that my website is being designed with a light and a dark mode. But as you can see, as I'm swapping between light and dark mode, this logo is changing. The difficult thing about that is that I can't just use one logo. I can't just link an image standard the way that you would inside of HTML normally. I have to actually link to the image via CSS so that I can then go back and change the image later with a dark mode, which I don't know if that makes any sense. So I'll just show you what we're doing here. I'm going to hang out in dark mode and light mode for a second. And what I can do is if I come up here to the top of this navigation, I'll just create a new link here. We'll do ahref equals your standard hash, just because I want this to link back to, we'll just go ahead and have it linked to index.html. That's where I always want this logo to link to. If you click on it, and then I'll close that tag, and then just right inside of this, what I'll do is I'll do a nav, give it an ID, logo, and then close the nav. And then whenever we start working on our CSS, we'll be able to select this ID the same way that we would use any selector or select any class and a link to our actual logo. And now let's switch over to our CSS page to get some of this kind of set up. So since we have this new color setting set up, we'll go ahead and use that. This should be pretty simple. Since we have the footer here, we can actually just use the same colors. So we'll just come to the end of the footer and we'll add a comma and then say also use this for the header. And then if we come down to the bottom where we have the media query for our dark mode set up, we can do the same thing. And then we should have some of the colors there, like basically immediately. Yeah, the colors are changing a little bit and you can see a little bit of a background here. Okay, that looks nice. We might actually be able to inherit some other settings from the footer. So if we come down here to the actual footer settings here, where we have the link color and the link text settings set up, we can probably also copy those over. So what I'll do is I'll do header nav a link. So this will select, in addition to any of the links that are in the nav in the footer, it will do the same thing for the header. And so, yeah, okay, that's updating. These look very similar to the footer now. And then we can probably also inherit this text align setting right here. So the easy way to do that would be, again, we'll just add a comment and say also apply this to the header. If we swap over to the header and reload, now it's in the center. Very nice. That's exactly what we want. And I think that's probably about all. We don't really want to inherit the same margin or padding settings from the footer. We probably want to use our own custom ones. So I guess we'll just open up a new setting right here. I guess below this footer would probably be a good place for it right here. And we'll just select the header and we'll say top 0 pixels and then position fixed. And then we'll also do width 100%. So what this is going to do is a few different things. Actually, it's probably easiest just to show you. If we take a look at the header on my website as it exists right now, you'll notice it's sort of locked to the top of the page. It never moves. And so what these settings will do is basically enable that. What we're saying basically is we want this to be 0 pixels from the top of the page at all time. So if we were to change this value right here to something like 100 pixels, and then if we refresh the page, it'll sit 100 pixels from the top of the page at all times. That's not what we want. We just want it to be, 0 pixels. Position fixed is just saying, hey, it's going to be in this one position, and then width 100% is making sure that it's going to span the entire width of the page. And now we have a header that floats on top of our page rather than moving around like your normal element, which is exactly what we want. And I guess the next thing to do would be to just add a little bit of padding here. And so the easiest way to do that is we'll just come right down here to the width and we'll say padding, and we'll do maybe 0.5 EM on the top and the bottom, and then 0 EM for the left and the right. Take a look at that to see how it looks. Yeah, that looks good. It's gonna look better once we get the logo in there, but I think for now that will definitely probably do the trick. We have a little bit of an issue where it's cutting off a bit of the top of our page, and probably the easiest way to address that would be to come back over to the HTML side of this, and then just right below the header here, we could add in a custom ID. So we could just do like a div and then give it an ID. We could just call it like spacer or something, and then close out of the div. And I'll do a little bit of a comment here just so that we know what it is. This is the spacer to fix header issue. Oh, and I just noticed we spelled that wrong. It's index.html. And then I'll also add one of those title elements here so that when we hover over the logo, eventually, it will just say, go to homepage. maybe? Yeah, that's probably pretty verbose and people know what that means. And then if we switch back over to the CSS, what we could do is down here at the bottom of the header and footer settings, we could select that spacer ID that we just set up, and then inside of some squiggly brackets, we could do margin top. Whoa, spell it right, that will make it work much better. And we'll do maybe like 100 pixels or something. Look good. Let's refresh and see what happens. Oh yeah, okay, that'll work fine. I'll actually add just a tiny bit more space because I know the header is going to get bigger whenever we do the logo. So let's go ahead and do that and see what happens here. So underneath this header settings, we'll go ahead and select the logo ID that we have set up in the HTML. And inside of some squiggly brackets, the first thing I want to do is select the background. And then I'm going to do URL, and we're going to link to the images page on our site. Let me come back out to the Finder, and I'll try to explain this the best that I can. Basically, if we take a look at the directory that this website lives in, our CSS page, which is what we're editing right now, lives in its own custom folder called CSS. This is the page that we're editing. So what we need to do in order to create a link to this logo right here is we need to go up one level outside of our CSS page and then go into a folder called images and select either mdark or m. And just for consistency's sakes, we'll rename this to mlight. So the way that we're going to do that is when we type in a URL, it's going to be inside a parentheses, so we can go ahead and add those. The syntax for the URL in the background is a little bit weird. It needs to be closed out by a semicolon, and the URL needs to be both inside of parentheses and inside of quotes. And then when we link to the URL, what we need to do is .. And what that's going to do is it's going to move us up one level inside of our directory. Anytime you want to move up one level inside of a website directory, at least as far as CSS is concerned, it's .. That will move you up one folder structure, like take you out of the folder that you're in right now. And so then what we can do is we can link to that images folder, and now we're inside of the images folder. And now that we're inside of that folder, we can select m-dark.png. And if we refresh the page right now, I don't think anything will really happen because we have to set up some sizing. So the way that works is I'll give it a value here. I'll say width is going to be 40 pixels, and then I'll also say the height is going to be 40 pixels. And then if we refresh now, we might get something. Okay, cool. There we go. You'll see a little bit of a stripe here, and what's happening is our image itself is much larger than 40 pixels. If we take a look at it here, it's 500 by 500 pixels. So what we need to do is scale that down. I think the easiest way to do that is with another setting here called background size. And then we can just say 40 pixels. Whoops. 40 pixels, 40 pixels for the width and the height. And then now if we refresh, we should get, there we go. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. That's looking pretty nice. All we really need to do is like sort of center it up, which is easy enough. All we need to do is margin auto. And then what it will do is just, until we tell it to change margins, it will just use the same margin on the left and right side. One thing I'll do really quickly here is, since this is a link, I'll go ahead and create some hover settings. So if I come down to this line, I'm just gonna say logo, hover, and then I'm just gonna set the to 0.8% maybe. Okay, very nice. I don't know what the heck's going on now. It's just disappearing. Okay. Maybe we don't actually need the percent sign there. I think maybe I think this is just a syntax error. Which, if you were using something other than Vim, you probably would never have the problem. Okay, there we go. Cool. So yeah, that looks nice. And then we'll just clean it up a bit. We'll come up to the logo and we'll say transition 0.3s, which stands for 0.3 seconds. And then if we refresh, we should just have like sort of a nicer fade into the hover color, which is exactly what we want. And then what we can do is we can make this sort of dark mode compliant. So if we go ahead and swap over into dark mode, you'll see actually our background and our text is good to go because we're using the same settings from the footer. We might want to come down here and see where all we have the footer referenced. So we're good there. We just need to change the logo over. And the way that we do that is pretty simple. Just right below all of our headings here, we'll go ahead and select the logo ID again. And we'll open up some squiggly brackets, and then we'll say background, and we'll do the URL thing again. And we just need to link to images / mlight.png. And this will be selecting the lighter version of the logo, of course. And then we can go ahead and close out of this. And I think, yeah, we'll still have to change all of those background size settings and the image size settings. So what we can do is we can do background size 40 pixels, 40 pixels. And then if we go ahead and reload here, we'll get exactly what we want. The hover settings still work with the opacity. So now that looks really good in dark mode and light mode, which is pretty freaking awesome. Cool. We're well on our way here. I think the last thing we need to do is just make this work with our mobile website, which, if you remember from the footer video, we did by sort of hiding the navigation. You know, if we were to shrink this website at our breaking point, our footer links down here are just going to disappear. And that's the same thing that we want to do with our header up here. The easiest way to do that is, again, to just copy from the work we already did with the footer. So right down here in the mobile site settings where we have this bit here to change the links to not be displayed whenever we get to our mobile site, we're just going to add a comment and say, you know, hey, do the same thing for the header, nav, links. And then if we go ahead and refresh the page, they should disappear. And whenever we hit the breaking point, they'll go and leave. So now we can just go ahead and create a mobile menu, which will be the most interesting part of this video probably, because we're going to incorporate a little bit of JavaScript. And so you may have noticed this website directory now has this folder called script in it. We're just going to put some JavaScript in here. But before we can do that, we need to actually build the element that we want to be our mobile site menu. So we'll go back over to the code here. And the easiest way to do this is we'll come to the HTML page. And so what we'll do is we'll come down right below our header here, and we'll start working on the mobile header. So what we'll do is we'll create a new div, and we'll give it an ID, and the ID can be, we'll say mobile menu, and then we can go ahead and create some links. So I'm going to do a href, have it linked to a blank page, and then we'll say inside of here we'll put a parenthesis, and we'll say like gear I use. These are going to be the footer, like the secondary navigation links. So we'll need, let's see, probably we can actually just look over here and see how many links we have. Is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So we'll just make, 6 copies. Okay. And then we can just sort of change the words here. And then we'll just do a line break here, and we'll do more links. And these are going to be our main links. So we'll do a blank link, and then inside of this, we're going to put an H4, which again is just our smallest heading that we've set up. And we can put in all of our main links. We'll close the H4 and then close the link. And then we can go ahead and make a couple of copies and change these to be whatever they need to be. And if we go ahead and refresh now, we're going to get some stuff that looks a little weird probably. It's going to be mostly hidden by this header, and it's just going to look very, very odd. So what we'll do is I want sort of a menu to be over here in the corner so that we can actually enable the mobile menu with a click. If we take a look at the finished version here, when we go down to the mobile menu, we have a menu that we can click on, and then as we click it, the mobile menu will appear and disappear. And so to get that, we actually just went back to font awesome. And then there's a lot of these sort of elements that you can use if you just search for like bars. You'll get a lot of these sort of hamburger menu type things. I believe these here, just the standard ones, are the ones that I've used on my site. And so we'll just copy over that little bit of code again for them. And we can drop it in right here, probably right above the mobile menu would be the best spot for it. So I'm just going to create a div for it right now, and we'll come back to this in a little bit whenever we start working on the JavaScript, since this is the actual button that we're using to hide and select things. But for now, if we just refresh, we're not really going to see anything, but just trust it's under there. We'll do some CSS formatting to get it right, and it'll be all good. So speaking of CSS, let's go ahead and just swap over to our CSS page and start working on this. So the first thing we'll do is under our header and footer settings for the desktop version of our site, I'm just going to go ahead and hide everything that we don't want to show up. So we don't want those bars showing up. We don't want our extra mobile menu showing up. And luckily we have an ID for both of those. We'll come right below our logo hover settings, and we'll select the FAB bars. And we're just going to say display none. And then we'll do the same thing for that mobile menu ID. And then what should happen is if we refresh, we'll have just a normal looking desktop site, and we won't get any of the new weirdness until we shrink down to the mobile version of our site, which is exactly what we want. Now let's go ahead and start working on the mobile site. So let's go ahead and go down to the bottom of our page to our mobile site settings. We're going to come right around here where the footer settings are. We'll actually come just right below them, and we'll go ahead and select the FA bars. And this is that element that we got from Font Awesome, of course. And inside of this, what we'll do is we'll say font size, we'll say maybe like 18 point or something. And then we can just do position fixed to make sure that it sticks to the top with the header. And then we'll change the display type to block. Again, that'll just make sure that it's not going to interfere with anything else. It'll be like its own element. And then we'll lock it to the top, and we'll give it just like a little bit of a margin so that things don't get right up next to it. And then if we refresh the page, what we should have is a bar. Okay, cool. It's not going to do anything yet, but you can see we do have a link. Well, it's not a link yet. We can't click on it, but we've got the beginnings of what we're after here. So that's exactly what we want. And then what we'll do is we can go ahead and select the mobile menu ID, and then inside of here we'll say display block so that we can see what we're editing. And then we'll give it a little bit of a top margin, maybe like 57 or so, and then we'll also give it some padding, maybe 1. And if we take a look, it'll look pretty much, the same. All we're really doing is just pushing this down so that it's separated from this original header. And then one other thing we can do just to make this look a little bit better is if we come up towards the top where we have our settings for the appearance for our header and our footer, right up here on our color settings where we have the background and the border color, we can also just link the mobile menu ID. And what should happen is we should inherit that same background color. And yeah, okay, cool. So that'll look right in the light mode, and then we'll just have to link it up with the dark mode as well. So we'll just add that down there, mobile menu. And then if we go ahead and refresh one more time, then we'll have a nice looking menu. It'll sort of look like it's part of the header rather than just being an element on the page, which is what we want. Okay, and so then the next thing we'll do is we'll just mess with the links a little bit. So we'll do mobile menu a link, and this is just going to select any of the links that are in this mobile menu, and we'll just say text decoration none. That should get rid of those weird underlines. And then we'll say text transform uppercase, and then if we refresh, you can pretty clearly see what we're getting at here. The last thing I'll do is I'll just center all of these headers over to the left side here. So what we'll do is we'll select the mobile menu ID one more time, and then we'll just say, select any of the H4s, and then inside of that we can just do text align to the left. And I think I might also want to mess with the margins. Let me take a look here. Yeah, so we can just shrink those margins down a little bit. We'll just do maybe margin 0 and take a look at what that looks like. That's probably fine. Cool. I think we are ready to start messing with JavaScript now. Let's make sure that all this looks good. Light mode and dark mode, yeah, it's looking very nice. And once we're in the desktop site, all of the junk that we don't want is going to disappear regardless. And so now all we need to do is make this button actually show and hide our mobile menu. So if you take a look up here at the original mobile menu settings down here in the mobile settings for our site, what I did was I set display to block. If I change that to none, it's going to hide it, and it'll look totally normal, like there's no menu whatsoever. And then if I change it back to block, it will be showing. So what we need is a piece of JavaScript that will basically be able to change this setting for the mobile menu from block to none, or actually from none to block, because by default we would like for this to not be showing anything. So in order for this to work, all we need to do is come into this script folder and create a new file called script.js, something like that. Pretty easy to do that inside of Vim. And then what we should have is a new file down here in our scripts folder called main.js. And this will be where we can create some JavaScript. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just go ahead and open up that new file, and we need to create a new. So the way that we do that is we're going to say function, and we need to give the function a name. I'm just going to call this mobile menu, and then we'll just end that with two open and close parentheses here. And then we'll open up some squiggly brackets just like we would in CSS and give ourselves a bit of room to start working. So the next thing that we need to do is actually link to this JavaScript page from our HTML. So we'll go over to our HTML page here, index.html, and we need to just create a link to it. So we will come over here and we'll say, open up a script tag, and we'll say source or src equals script/main.js. That's the directory where this lives. We can go ahead and close out of that, close the script tag, and we should be all good. And then the other thing that we need to do is down here on our FA bars element, and if you remember, this is this element right here, we need to actually allow it to use the function. So if we take a look at what we've done so far, all we have is a JavaScript page that has one function inside of it called mobile menu. So what we want to do is we want to come down to that button, the place where we put that button, which is this FA bars thing. And then inside of the div that surrounds that, we're just going to say on click, we just want to trigger mobile menu, the mobile menu function. And all we're saying here is that whenever this button is clicked, we want to go ahead and do whatever is built into this function in our JavaScript. So of course, if we were to reload the page right now, we'll be able to click on the button, but it's not going to do anything for us. So now if we go ahead and come over to our script, we can actually make this function do something. So the first thing we need to do is select the actual ID that we want to be opening and closing, which again, if we take a look at the CSS, is just this mobile menu ID. So what we can do is we can come in here and we'll say var x equals, and this is just saying our first variable is going to equal document.get element by ID. And all this is saying is that we want to select an element based on ID, which is, great, that's what we've got. So we'll say mobile menu, and then we'll close the parentheses. And now what we're doing is we're selecting this mobile menu ID for the rest of our function. So the next thing that we can do is we'll do a quick little if then else type statement. So we'll say if x.style display. And what this is saying is if the display setting for this ID is equal to none, we're going to change it to block. And then we can go ahead and close that squiggly bracket. So all this is really saying is that our first variable is selecting this mobile menu CSS class or CSS ID. And then if the display is set to none, we want to change it to block. And then all we need to do is to make the button do the same thing is we'll say if else. So if the display is set to block, if it's, the other option, all we need to do is we'll open up some squigglies here. We'll say x style display equals none. The variable, we're selecting the mobile menu ID. If the display is set to none, we want it to change to block. And then if the display is set to block, we want to change it to none. So now if we go ahead and write all of this, refresh our web page, we should have a button that controls our mobile menu. Let's find out. And of course, there we go. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you everyone for checking it out. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.